I'll never forget the day Robert sat across from me in my office. His lab results were in my hand, and his creatinine was 2.9. I'm Dr. Johnny, and as his doctor, I had to say the word that made his blood run cold: dialysis. His kidneys were working at barely 30%. I saw the fear in his eyes as he realized what that meant, the thought of being tied to a machine, losing his independence, watching his golden years slip away far too soon. But here's the part that even I didn't expect. 6 months later, Robert's creatinine dropped to 2.2, and it didn't happen because of an expensive treatment or some experimental drug. It happened because of 7 simple foods, the kind you can find in any grocery store, maybe even in your kitchen right now. If you've ever been told your creatinine is too high, if you've tried everything, cutting salt, following diets, taking every pill only to see your numbers keep climbing, then I want you to stay with me. Because Robert's story isn't just about one man beating the odds. It's about something far more powerful: the body's incredible ability to heal itself when we finally give it the right support. Robert was 68, a retired carpenter from Ohio, the kind of man who built homes with his own 2 hands and never asked for help. He raised a family, lived the American dream, and even in retirement, he still found pride in fixing anything that was broken. He was strong, independent, and the kind of grandfather who never missed a soccer game. To his wife, Margaret, he was the rock she had leaned on for 45 years. But 3 years ago, things began to shift in ways so small they were almost invisible. Robert started taking afternoon naps, something he had never done in his life. Those naps grew longer, stretching into hours. By evening, his ankles would swell until his work boots felt tight and uncomfortable. Margaret noticed he was breathing heavier, climbing the stairs, pausing halfway up, gripping the handrail as though the climb was steeper than it had ever been. He brushed it off with the words men often use: just getting older. But deep down, he knew something wasn't right. And that's the truth I've seen again and again in patients like Robert. The early signs of kidney trouble don't come with flashing alarms. They whisper. They creep in disguised as normal aging. You tell yourself it's nothing serious until the day those whispers turn into a diagnosis that changes everything. That Tuesday morning in March, Robert walked into my office for what he thought was just another routine checkup. But when I looked at his labs, I knew it wasn't routine at all. His creatinine was 2.9. I set the papers down on my desk, and for a moment, the room felt heavier, quieter. I chose my words carefully, but nothing could soften the blow. Robert, I said, your kidneys are only working at about 30%. This indicates significant kidney disease. If we don't see improvement in the next 6 months, we'll need to prepare for dialysis. I watched as his eyes fixed on the floor, his breathing shallow. The word dialysis landed like a hammer. In that moment, I wasn't just talking to a patient. I was watching a man confront the possibility of losing everything he valued: his freedom, his strength, his role as the dependable grandfather and husband. He barely heard the rest of my explanation. All he could picture was being tethered to a machine 3 times a week, forever. When he left my office, he didn't drive away immediately. Later, Robert told me he sat in his truck for 20 minutes, staring at the prescription slip and referral in his hand, feeling like his life had just been split in 2 the years before this moment, and whatever future was left after it. Then his phone buzzed a text from his granddaughter, asking if he'd come to her soccer game that weekend. That small message hit him harder than my diagnosis, because it made him wonder if he'd even live to see her graduate. And that's where Robert's fight truly began, not against me, not against the diagnosis, but against the belief that his story was already written. When Robert first added cabbage to his meals, it wasn't because he expected a miracle. It was because it felt familiar, comforting, the kind of food his grandmother used to simmer in a pot on cold Ohio nights. A simple bowl of cabbage soup with onions and garlic became his starting point. But what it did inside his body was far from simple. Cabbage is part of the cruciferous family, loaded with compounds that support the liver, And when the liver works more efficiently, the kidneys don't have to carry the full toxic load. For Robert, this meant digestion felt easier within just a week. The heavy bloating he had lived with for months began to fade. And after meals, he no longer felt weighed down, but instead lighter, almost relieved. Margaret noticed the difference too. He had more color in his cheeks in the mornings and even cracked a few jokes at breakfast again. That small shift gave them both hope, a sense that maybe his body wasn't giving up after all. And cabbage was only the beginning. Because right after it, another humble vegetable stepped up not just to comfort, but to act as a toxin sweeper, binding poisons before they could ever reach the kidneys. That vegetable was cauliflower. Cauliflower wasn't something Robert thought he'd enjoy. When his daughter first served it mashed as a substitute for potatoes, he braced himself for disappointment, but to his surprise, it was creamy, satisfying, and even comforting. What Robert didn't know then was that cauliflower was working on a deeper level, helping his kidneys in ways no medication had managed to. Inside this unassuming vegetable is a powerful compound called sulforaphane. Think of it like a broom for the body. Instead of letting toxins pile up and force the kidneys to deal with them, sulforaphane binds to those toxins in the gut and sweeps them out through the digestive system. For Robert, that meant his kidneys no longer had to struggle against the constant flood of waste. He noticed the difference in small but powerful ways. After dinner, he didn't feel that heavy sluggishness that used to drag him down. Instead, he felt lighter, steadier, and more awake. It was as if his body had quietly taken a sigh of relief. These were subtle changes, but when you've lived with fatigue and swelling for months, subtle feels miraculous. But while cauliflower acted like a gentle protector, Robert soon discovered another vegetable that fought on the front lines. Bright, bold, and loaded with antioxidants. Red bell peppers didn't just nourish him, they defended his kidneys like a shield against daily inflammation. When Robert first sliced red bell peppers into his breakfast eggs, he thought of them as just a splash of color on the plate, but those bright strips were far more than decoration. Red bell peppers are packed with vitamin C, more than twice what you'd get from an orange. For the kidneys, that matters. Every single day, they filter nearly 50 gallons of blood, and in that process, free radicals build up like sparks in a dry forest. Left unchecked, those sparks can set off inflammation that damages delicate kidney tissue. The antioxidants in red bell peppers act like fire extinguishers, putting out those sparks before they ignite real damage. For Robert, the change was noticeable. Within 2 weeks, he no longer woke up with legs that felt stiff and wooden. He could stand from bed without bracing himself, move without wincing. Margaret noticed the difference too. His mornings no longer started with groans of pain, but with steady steps toward the coffee pot. Small, ordinary peppers had become a daily shield, guarding his kidneys against the slow burn of inflammation. But inflammation wasn't Robert's only enemy. High blood pressure was tightening its grip too, threatening to push his kidneys closer to failure. That's when an ancient remedy, used for thousands of years not just as food but as medicine, entered the picture: garlic. Garlic was the one Robert hesitated over. He worried the flavor would be too sharp, too overpowering, but Margaret reminded him that once cooked, garlic softens, releasing not only its aroma, but also its healing strength. Inside garlic lies a compound called allicin, and for the kidneys, it can be a game changer. High blood pressure is one of the most vicious cycles in kidney disease. It damages the fragile blood vessels inside the kidneys, which in turn lose their ability to regulate pressure, driving it even higher. Garlic helps break that cycle. Allicin relaxes blood vessels, improves circulation, and reduces the inflammatory markers that silently scar kidney tissue. Within just 3 weeks of adding garlic to his meals, Robert noticed something different. His blood pressure readings dropped from the mid-140s to the 120s. More importantly, he felt calmer, steadier, no longer weighed down by the pounding in his chest that used to make him uneasy at night. Garlic became more than a seasoning. It became part of his recovery. Even his doctor's visits felt lighter when the numbers on the monitor finally shifted in his favor. But garlic wasn't working alone. Another everyday food, one Robert had once avoided because it upset his stomach, would soon prove to be a hidden ally. With its fibers feeding the gut and its compounds calming inflammation, onions quietly stepped forward as the next unexpected defender of his kidneys. Onions were tricky for Robert. For years, he had avoided them because they made his stomach uneasy. But when Margaret gently introduced them back into his meals slowly, carefully, something surprising happened. Instead of discomfort, Robert found relief. Onions are rich in special fibers called prebiotics, food for the good bacteria in your gut. And when those bacteria thrive, they create a healthier balance in the digestive system, reducing the toxic byproducts that would otherwise spill into the blood and force the kidneys to clean them up. For someone with kidney disease, that's no small gift. On top of that, onions are loaded with quercetin, a natural anti-inflammatory that calms the overactive signals damaging kidney tissue. Within a few weeks, Robert noticed his digestion felt smoother, lighter. Margaret noticed something too. He no longer looked puffy in the mornings, and he wasn't wincing with stomach cramps after meals. The very food he once pushed aside was now quietly protecting him from the inside out, creating a healthier foundation for his kidneys to do their work. And while onions worked silently in Robert's gut, another food was preparing to make a much louder statement: deep red, naturally sweet, and famous for boosting circulation. Beetroot would prove to be a turning point in his journey, bringing fresh blood, oxygen, and hope straight to his struggling kidneys. Beetroot was the food Robert almost refused. He had heard warnings about potassium, and the deep red color made him suspicious. But after talking it over with his doctor, he agreed to try just half a cup, twice a week. What happened next felt almost immediate. Beetroot is rich in natural nitrates, which the body converts into nitric oxide, a compound that relaxes blood vessels, improves circulation, and increases blood flow directly to the kidneys. Within just hours of his first serving, Robert's blood pressure readings looked steadier. Over the following weeks, he noticed something else. The heaviness in his legs began to ease. His morning walks felt lighter, and the swelling that had once clung to his ankles started to fade. For Robert, it was like someone had opened a valve and given his body room to breathe again. Beetroot wasn't just food, it was fuel, carrying oxygen and nutrients to places that had been starved for too long. It gave his kidneys the support they desperately needed to filter more effectively. But while beetroot gave Robert's body the gift of circulation, there was still one more piece of the puzzle. Sweet, colorful, and bursting with antioxidants, berries would step in as the final defenders, tiny fruits with the power to calm inflammation and protect his kidneys from within. Berries were the one food Robert thought he couldn't have. "Aren't they too sugary?" he asked. But the truth surprised him. Unlike many fruits, berries are naturally low in potassium and sugar while bursting with protective antioxidants. Their deep colors come from compounds called anthocyanins, which are powerful enough to cross into kidney tissue and directly calm inflammation. Blueberries, strawberries, cranberries, they all work together like a team of quiet guardians, protecting Robert's kidneys from the daily wear and tear of oxidative stress. He started with just half a cup stirred into his morning oats, and within weeks, Margaret noticed something new. The puffiness around his eyes had faded, replaced by a clearer, brighter look. Robert himself felt steadier, more energized, and far less weighed down by fatigue. These tiny fruits, so ordinary on the surface, became a daily reminder that nature often hides its most powerful medicine in the simplest forms. For Robert, berries weren't just a snack. They were proof that healing could be sweet, refreshing, and hopeful. And as Robert looked back on his journey, cabbage, cauliflower, red bell peppers, garlic, onions, beetroot, and now berries, he realized something profound. The road to reclaiming his kidneys had not been paved with pills or machines, but with simple foods that rebuilt his strength one meal at a time. And that revelation would carry him into the future with hope instead of fear. Robert's story reminds us of something I want every one of you to remember. Kidney health isn't about perfection. It's about small, consistent steps that build up over time. You don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight. Just start with one food, one choice, one change. Every meal is a chance to protect your kidneys, to reclaim your energy, and to add more time with the people you love. And I want you to know you're not alone in this. I've seen the fear that comes with high creatinine levels. And I've also seen the hope that returns when patients realize their body still has the power to fight back. So please, don't give up. Your kidneys deserve your care, and so do you. If this video has helped you, save it so you can come back to these foods whenever you need a reminder. And make sure you subscribe to the channel, because I'll be sharing more of the latest medical insights and practical tips to protect your kidneys and your health. Together, we can make sure you not only add years to your life, but life to your years.